the moon landing. I just can't get behind it. I can't believe it happened.
You don't think it happened?
No. I think it's weird. I think Elon Musk knows it didn't happen because he says when he's asked, he's like, oh, it's kind of weird how we just never went back. And, like the moon is 26,000 miles away. And now and since being there, we've never gone beyond 200 miles. It's like the whole thing, if you look into it, it's weird. And then like they also live aired it in 1969. Like that's weird.
We've never landed men on the moon since that?
I don't think we did it the first time.
Yeah,
but like technically,
I agree with you because it's like we're
weird.
so much more advanced.
We're more advanced. We've never done it again.
Yeah.
It's just that the whole thing's weird. And then they lost all the original tapes, but they premiered it live all around the world. We don't even have cell phones. Like the whole thing is just, I can't get behind the moon landing. And I argue with everyone about this. I'm like, guys, leave me alone.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a
50
liftoff.
years on, the feud continues, as a surprising number of people still believe that we never landed on the moon. The question lies at the heart of one of the greatest conspiracy theories of all time, a theory born from an era of global suspicion, political mistrust, and fake news.
One, I have so many questions about the moon landing and what it is that we've been told about the moon landing. Two, I don't believe the moon landing ever happened, but more so I'm going to present to you plenty of evidence, in my opinion, as to why it is I don't believe it ever happened. And number three, which is probably the most important, I'm going to explain to you why it is I believe we were lied to about the moon landing and how it affects my life and your life personally.
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.
Man, welcome back to another episode of the Ruling Class Podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Diddy, back up in this witch with another video. And if you're new to the show, I just ask that you please consider subscribing to the channel. Everybody else, including new people, I ask that you please hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm. I would really appreciate it. Listen, a couple of days ago, I presented a poll and I asked you all what it is that you like about this channel, what it is that you like seeing. Because I want to only present, for the most part, content that you all want to check out, right? There's no reason I should have about 25,000 subscribers and getting 200-300 views on a video. I don't know if I'm being shadow banned. I don't know if you all are just not feeling the content. I don't know. I need that feedback, so please hop in the comments and let me know. But anyways, the results of this poll showed, to my surprise, that the number one thing you all would like to see was conspiracy theory-based videos. Now, you know I don't use the term conspiracy theory because I believe that term was created in order to deter people and discourage people from, doing their own research and looking into certain topics, right? So today, I thought it would be the biggest treat and my biggest honor to present to you some extensive research that I've done as it pertains to, of all things, the moon landing. Now, this may seem random to you all, but it's not, because moon landing is probably one of the most original conspiracy theories, quote unquote, if you will. But I'm not just out here just saying things. I don't believe it happened just to say it. 9/11 didn't happen just to say it. No. I'm presenting these things and I'm going to talk about factual things. YouTube moderators, if you're watching, I'm going to only present the information that's been given to us as it pertains to the moon landing and the information surrounding it and how there are many red flags. So without wasting any more time, let's get into the video. I have questions. October 4th, 1957. That's the time that we are told that one of the biggest achievements in history occurred, which was Russia actually being the first country to send satellites to space. This led to something called the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States, right? And being that this, like most things in history, unfortunately, was about competition, this meant that the US was losing this race since Russia had already successfully sent satellites to space, right? So during the 1960s, as you can imagine, America was extremely determined to outshine Russia in the space race by any means necessary, that they were spending an incredible amount of time and resources to achieve what most people at the time and even now would have considered as the impossible, which is safely and successfully sending human beings into outer space to actually land on the moon. Well, as many of you know already, on July 19, 1969, the United States Apollo 11 was officially the first crewed mission to land on the moon. And now, two of the most infamous names in American history, two American astronauts, that being Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, The person, by the way, Buzz Lightyear, the cartoon character, was actually named after. That's a fun fact for you, if many of you probably didn't know that. They were the first ones to ever land on the moon, and even placed the American flag on the moon's crust. This event was so monumental and groundbreaking that for more than 2 hours, 500 million people or more watched in amazement a live broadcast from the moon as the event was taking place, right? This was massive. Till this day, it still gives, many people chills, knowing that human beings had actually walked on the moon. That's crazy, right? According to NASA, America didn't just travel to the moon this one time, though. They actually went instead a total number of 6 times. And pay attention to that number, because even that number is already very symbolic. And it's not an accident that they went 6 times, or they say that they went 6 times, right? But we'll get to that later. As expected, most people around the country celebrated this unbelievable achievement. But what if I told you that there were also many credible people out there who didn't quite believe the hype and saw through the charades? What if I told you that many people, even back then while this was all taking place, noticed a few inconsistencies in the whole quote-unquote moon landing storyline? First thing many people noticed and pointed out was that they doubted the actual moon landing footage, right? There were many people who believed that the footage was actually on the moon at all, but instead somewhere in a Hollywood movie studio. For example, a writer who was working for Rolling Stone during the 60s by the name of Bill Casing said that he highly believed that the moon landing was a hoax simply due to the fact that the technology during the time was not advanced enough and would not have allowed Americans, or anyone else for that matter, to travel to the moon with a safe return. Bill Casing became the face of the moon landing conspiracy to this day for many people who also believe the same as he did. In fact, this man Bill Casing even went as far as to write an entire book titled "We Never Went to the Moon: America's $30 billion Swindle." In this book, Mr. Casing went to extensive measures to detail why he believed this. For one, a major component within his argument of this all being a hoax was the absence of stars in the lunar surface photographs that were taken. And there were also other unexplained optical anomalies within the quote-unquote moon landing photographs. He also argued that NASA just did not have the technical expertise to land a man on the moon and safely return him, right? But something even more strange that Bill Casing pointed out was that in 1967, during the Apollo 1 space mission, the entire astronaut crew unfortunately passed away, but Casing believes that was foul play and that this was not accidental in order to prevent these astronauts from exposing space travel as a hoax, right? Another great point that has been made over the years has been the fact that we have yet to go back to the moon since the 60s and 70s, which is strange, right? How is it that we now, in a much more technological, or I should say technical advance, right, in a time where our technology and even science is a lot more advanced than it was in the 60s and 70s, yet we have not even made a successful attempt that I'm aware of to go back to the moon? How is that? It makes no sense. We're almost 50 years later. What's the holdup? But let's get back to something that Bill pointed out earlier, which was the moon landing photography. Well, it wasn't just the photography that had some people skeptical. There is also footage of the moon landing in which you can see the 2 astronauts moving the American flag in different motions, right? You see it right here. Well, the problem with this footage is that it just doesn't look real. In fact, many would argue that it looks more like some sort of edited video that they were able to get away with, back in the 60s and 70s, because technology wasn't as advanced. But when we're in 2022, 2023, and technology is where it is, and we have iPhones and things of that sort, and especially content creators such as myself who edit our own videos, we're able to look at content like this and notice how low grade and almost laughable this footage is to be taken seriously. Just my opinion. Well, you may say, well, what's the big deal? So what? They may have lied about going to the moon. They may have done it just to outshine Russia and beat Russia. Seems like it isn't that big of a deal to me. Doesn't affect my life in any way. Well, that's just the thing. Actually, it does. The more and more I have researched and looked into the moon landing, the less and less I believe it ever took place. As many of you who have been watching this channel during, my More Than a Coincidence series, as this is a continuation of the More Than a Coincidence series, I have spoken about in the past the Freemasons and how I believe they are the rulers of this world, and are responsible for many sinister things happening around us. For example, many people don't know that the Freemasons were actually behind the moon landing. Buzz Aldrin, interestingly enough, was actually a member of the Freemasons. Is that just a coincidence? Well, let's take this a step further. Most people are already aware that the American flag was allegedly placed on the moon during, America's travel to the moon. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that Buzz Aldrin actually, quote unquote, traveled to space with the Scottish Rite Masonic flag that was gifted to him by the supreme leaders of Freemasonry for that very purpose, right? This same very flag actually sits at the Masonic House of the Temple Archives and Museum. Well, you may say, if the moon landing was staged, then why would they go through the trouble of giving Buzz a Masonic flag to take there with him if we never went to the moon to begin with, right? Well, I believe, like many events for those that run our world, it was more about symbolism and status, right? About leaving their mark. I mean, if you don't believe that the Masons were behind the moon landing, just take a listen to this Freemason who actually works at the museum where that same flag is kept. And let's see what he slips up and says here.
I'm Joshua Poole, Museum Curator here at the Scottish Rite House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. Today it is my pleasure to be able to speak to you about the Scottish Rite flag that went to the moon in 1969. Knowing that Buzz Aldrin would be taking part in the Apollo 11 mission, the Supreme Council thought it would be nice if he could take something Masonic with him to infinity and beyond, because he was going where no man, or Mason for that matter, had ever gone before. See what I did there? The Supreme Council felt that a flag that represented the Supreme Council and Freemasonry in general would do the job. So the flag was hand-sewn by Inga Baum, who was the librarian of the Supreme Council in 1969. The flag itself is white silk. It is edged by a band of gold and embroidered with the words, the Supreme Council, 33rd degree, Southern Jurisdiction, USA, the Southern Jurisdiction motto, Deus me umque jus, the double-headed eagle, the crown of the 33rd degree, the insignia of the Grand Commander, and the insignia of a Master Mason. After the Apollo 11 mission on September 16, 1969, Buzz Aldrin visited the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. and presented the flag to Grand Commander Luther Smith. Since then, the flag has remained in the custody of the House of the Temple's Archives and Museum Department. In an article about the Buzz Aldrin flag in the December 1969 issue of the New Age magazine, the historical significance of the Apollo 11 mission and its meaning for Masonry were discussed. So, does the landing on the moon have anything to do with Masonry? I think this article put it nicely by ending with this quote: "When man reaches new worlds, Masonry will be there." This flag's presence during the historic lunar expedition symbolizes Masonry's universal appeal. Masonry has been at the forefront of progress and human enlightenment since its beginnings, and will continue to be. This flag serves as a reminder of this. So, Masonry will always be there and will continue to boldly go where no man has gone before.
I mean, the man literally admits, that the Masons were involved in the quote-unquote moon landing. But I believe it was a bit deeper than just the symbolism, moon magic, or just beating Russia in a space race, right? It was a lot deeper. It was a lot more sinister than that. I believe that this moon landing idea was staged in order to guide people away from Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Now, before I lose some of you, because I know a lot of you out there may not be believers, just bear with me and just hear me out, right? Allow me to elaborate so this can make a little bit more sense to you. Let's just take a moment to think about it. We all know that the mere existence of space has been quote-unquote evidence for many people over centuries to believe that God cannot be real simply because of the existence of space. And I believe that this has been a strategic plan by the Masons since the 1700s. There's also a card game series called the quote-unquote Illuminati card games, created by a man named Steven Jackson, that came out in 1995. This card game series wasn't just your average card game, right? This card game series actually predicted several things that would take place in the early 2000s and even 2010s. If you would like an entire video about this card game series, please comment Illuminati card game below. If 100 people comment this, then this will be one of my next videos. Well, one of the cards within this series was one about the moon landing, and the way the moon landing was depicted on this card is interesting, to say the least. Let's take a look. If you look here, it actually shows the moon landing as a staged event that was shot in what appears to be some sort of movie studio, just as many people had suspected in the 60s and 70s. Now, what are the chances of that? Is that just a coincidence? I believe that by placing this moon landing information within a card game that also went on to predict many other events that would take place supports my theory that this was all a move to further the New World Order. Even the Freemason astronaut Buzz Aldrin himself admitted on camera that the moon landing actually never took place. Let's take a listen.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. We didn't, because we didn't.
You heard for yourself Mr. Buzz saying that America actually never successfully sent any human being to the moon and back. So the biggest question you, me, and everybody else should be asking is, why would America lie about something so innocent, so historical, right? And if they're willing to lie about something like that, what's their motive? What's their agenda for doing so, right? You all hop in the comment section and y'all give me y'all thoughts on this matter. What do you think? Because whether we actually went to the moon or not, I don't believe we'll ever be able to 100% prove if we ever went or not. But one thing is not up for question. There are many red flags surrounding the moon landing, and the people who run our world, in my opinion, that being the Freemasons, was behind it. Is this just a coincidence? I don't believe it is.
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.